Today I want to talk about the iPhone X and Face ID. Hey guys, today I thought I'd tell you a little bit about my iPhone X and one of the features, Face ID. Now I've been using the iPhone X for just over a month now, so I thought it was time to make some videos and share some of my impressions. Overall, I really love the iPhone X. In fact, I think it's the best iPhone that I've had so far. And I've had every iPhone since the iPhone 4S, except for the iPhone 8. I bought the iPhone X instead. I know there's a lot of hype around the iPhone X, but it shouldn't be that surprising that someone that uses an iPhone would think that the latest and top of the line iPhone was the best one that they've done to date. If it wasn't, well, that would be a really big story. Now, I also want to say is the iPhone X isn't going to be for everyone. Certainly, if you're an Android user, there's no reason you're going to want to give up Android and switch to the iPhone X. There's nothing so compelling about this phone that you would ditch Android and switch over to the iOS world. And if you're an iPhone user, this phone might be right for you, or if you need a new iPhone, you might be happier with the iPhone 8 or iPhone 8 Plus. Now, one of the issues with this phone is the price. This one is the 256 gig of storage model, and it costs $1,150. That's crazy expensive. The 64 gig model starts at $1,000. So I'm sure there's many people out there that want to upgrade their iPhone, but don't want to spend that kind of money. And with the iPhone 8, which is a much less expensive phone, you're going to get a great phone with many of the same features for a much lower price. Now, if you're considering the iPhone 8 Plus, the larger phone, that's where it gets interesting because the 256 gig model of the iPhone 8 Plus is $1,000. And that's the same price as the 64 gig iPhone X. So if you're interested in the more expensive iPhone 8 Plus, then you might want to take a look at the iPhone X and decide whether or not that's a better value for you. Let me try and explain to you what I like about the iPhone X so much. This is my previous iPhone. This is an iPhone 7 Plus. And I used this phone for about 11 months. And there's a lot of things I really love about this phone. I like the high resolution display, the better battery life, the dual sensor camera with optical image stabilization and portrait mode. But there's one thing I really can't stand about this phone, and that's the size. It's too damn big. Now, the phone is tall and it's also wide, and I think it's the width of the phone that I really don't like. Makes it very difficult to use in one hand. You always feel like you're going to drop it when you're holding it. It just feels unbalanced when you're trying to use it. Now, before I had the iPhone 7 Plus, I was using the iPhone 6S. The only reason I upgraded from the 6S to the iPhone 7 Plus was because I wanted to try the plus-size iPhone and take advantage of those features I just told you about. I knew it was a risk, and it turns out I really don't like this phone. It's just too big. Some of the issues with this phone, you put this in your pocket, you know it's in there. It's definitely weighing down one of your pockets. Put it in your pocket in the summer when you're wearing shorts, forget it. You feel totally lopsided. And this feels like it's going to fall out of your pocket when you sit down. This phone is so big. I found that everywhere I went, I'm carrying the phone in my hand. And that really just was unacceptable. I'd go out to the store and I realized I'm always carrying the phone in my hand because I hated having this thing in my pocket. I'd stuff it in my back pocket, and then I'd always have to remember to take it out of my back pocket before I got back in the car or sat down somewhere. So plus size iPhone was definitely not for me. That leads me to what I really like about the iPhone X so much. I'm getting many of the benefits of the plus size iPhone in a much smaller package. So let me just line up these three phones here. And the iPhone X is just slightly taller and slightly wider than the iPhone 6S. But you can see it's still significantly smaller than the iPhone 7 Plus. So I'm getting many of the advantages of the plus size iPhone in a much smaller package. I'm getting a high resolution display, a big display. In fact, the resolution on this display is higher. And the way they did that was by removing the home button and Touch ID fingerprint sensor from the bottom so they could bring the screen down to the full edge of the phone. And this phone also has the dual sensor camera. Now, both of these sensors have optical image stabilization, and the phone also has an improved portrait mode. Now, the one thing I'm not sure about is the battery life. The battery life seems better than the iPhone 6S. Not sure as good as the iPhone 7 Plus. I haven't really been in a lot of situations where I've been out for so long, I haven't had a chance to charge the phone to see how long it makes it on a single charge. But the battery life seems better than the 6S. Now, the other feature I wanted to talk about was Face ID. The way they put this big screen on the phone was to remove the home button and Touch ID fingerprint sensor. And they replaced that with two things. They replaced the home button with something called gestures. I'll talk about the gestures in a later video, but they replaced the fingerprint sensor, Touch ID, with Face ID. And what they did was they put a bunch of sensors up here in this area, this black area, they call that the notch, along with the front-facing camera. And with Face ID, the phone learns to recognize your face, and you can use that to unlock your phone, authenticate Apple Pay payments, and in place of a password in many of the other services on your phone. Now, when this feature came out, there was a lot of people talking about it, people saying it was never going to be as good, but I find Face ID works really well for me. It recognizes my face whether I'm wearing my prescription glasses or not, recognizes my face with my prescription sunglasses, recognizes my face when I'm wearing a hat. So I really haven't had a lot of issues unlocking my phone. Oh, it also recognizes my face outside at night. Works really, really well. All right, now the other place where Face ID gets used a lot is with Apple Pay. So Apple Pay is Apple's touchless payment system. You sign up for Apple Pay, and when you go to the store, you hold your phone up to the card reader. And if they support Apple Pay comes up, then you would authenticate to it, and it makes your payment without having to swipe your credit card. Really great feature. I love Apple Pay. I use Apple Pay all the time. For some reason, I was a little concerned about whether or not Apple Pay would work well with Face ID. And for me, it does. You can activate Apple Pay by double tapping the sleep wake button, and it's going to bring up a list of your cards. Usually it brings up the one that you have set as the default. And then all you need to do is tap the sleep wake button to authenticate the payment instead of with the previous iPhone touching the Touch ID sensor. And for me, that seems to work really well. A lot of people were worried about whether or not the phone was going to be able to see their face when they were making payments. I think one of the things that I was concerned about was when you're using any kind of touchless payment system in the store, you want it to be fast. You don't want to be sitting there fumbling and not have it work. And the worst is if for some reason it fails and you got to put your phone away, take out your wallet, your credit card, and swipe it, and everybody's kind of looking at you while you're there online. Now, the other area where Face ID is really awesome is with the other apps that use Touch ID for authentication. So if you have a third-party app like your pharmacy app, your banking app, I think even the Straight Talk app, if any place where you would need to enter in your username and password, many of those apps supported Touch ID, and they seamlessly support Face ID. I think the first time you run the app, you see a message saying that it's going to use Face ID to authenticate instead of Touch ID, and it just works very seamlessly. All right, now is Face ID perfect? No, there have been some cases where it doesn't recognize my face. The first one I found is in bed. Laying in bed, I put the phone on the nightstand, pick it up at night or early in the morning, it's dark, you're laying on your side, didn't recognize my face. I'm not sure why that is. It works really well outside in the dark at night, but for some reason it had trouble recognizing me laying in bed. Now, the second area I found was here in the winter in Boston. It's getting cold out. And the first time I put on a beanie, a wool hat, it didn't recognize my face. But here's the cool thing about Face ID. It actually learns. So when it doesn't recognize your face, you need to enter in your passcode. And apparently what the phone does is it looks at your face when you're entering the passcode and it learns. And what I have found is that the phone now recognizes my face when I'm laying in bed at night and I pick it up, and it learned to recognize me wearing a beanie really in like 1 or 2 tries. It was pretty impressive. Now, even though Face ID has some limitations, Touch ID did as well. First, in the winter, if you're wearing gloves, you can't unlock your phone with Touch ID. You can get those capacitive sensitive gloves, so you can operate your phone wearing gloves, but it can't read your fingerprint through the glove. So with Face ID in the winter, no reason to take off your gloves. In fact, with Touch ID, I even had a pair of gloves where I cut off the tip of my finger so that I could unlock my phone. The other area I found that Touch ID didn't work really well is if your hands are wet. Typically this would happen. I'm working in the kitchen, I'm cooking something, and my hands are dirty. I rinse off my hands, I dry them, pick up the phone, go to unlock it. Your hands aren't dry enough. Touch ID wouldn't recognize your fingerprint if your hands weren't completely dry. In fact, you just kind of got used to the fact that when you were in the kitchen or anytime your hands were wet, Touch ID probably wasn't going to work. All right, now I know a bunch of you guys are probably wondering, is Face ID really better than Touch ID? Well, I think it is, and the reason is because you don't think about it as much. When you go to unlock your phone, you just tap on it, swipe up, it recognizes your face, and it's unlocked. Now that said, the difference going from Touch ID to Face ID is much smaller than the difference of going from nothing to Touch ID. Touch ID was amazing when they came out with the fingerprint sensor and got that working. so much better than passcodes and passwords. The difference between Touch ID and Face ID, it's more subtle, but I'm beginning to like it more. Now, the other advantage of Face ID was they were able to remove the fingerprint sensor, the Touch ID sensor, and that's how you're getting the larger display on the smaller size phone. All right, guys, I think that's going to be it for this video. I'll be back with more videos on the iPhone 10. Just wanted to share some of my thoughts. Until then, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.